Hi, everybody. It's Crissy.
And Rachel.
We are from the Chattanooga Public Library. And guess what? It's spooky season. Every year, haunted houses and scare parks begin popping up just in time for Halloween. These businesses and the actors they employ make thousands of dollars just by dressing up as a zombie and terrorizing strangers. The horror movie industry makes millions off eager victims willing to pay for the chance for their heart to race. Being scared isn't a fun feeling, right? We're not supposed to want to feel scared. So why do we pay a bunch of money to make ourselves feel bad?
Fear is nothing new. Human beings are fearful creatures by nature and nurture. It kept our species alive when we lived as hunter-gatherers thousands of years ago, when everywhere lurked the constant fear of being attacked by wild animals, at the mercy of storms and floods, and running out of food or water. This is why irrational fears like heights, acrophobia, snakes, aphidophobia, spiders, arachnophobia, and deep water, thalassophobia, aren't actually irrational. They're the result of generations of hyper-aware danger sensors being literally coded into our DNA. Humans who feared snakes survived because they didn't get bit, and that fear got passed down to their descendants.
Nowadays, we have the knowledge and technology that allows us to chill out on some of those primal fears. Heights have been conquered by airplanes, deep water by submarines and scuba gear. With so little to fear, society started making up new ones. Most people I know who are afraid of sharks happen directly from the propaganda of early horror films like Jaws. Sharks aren't actually that dangerous. They deserve better, people. Speaking of sharks, the fear of sharks is known as Galleophobia. So let's break down that word. Phobia comes from the Greek word phobos, which means fear or horror. Merriam-Webster defines phobia as both exaggerated fear and intolerance and aversion. Most definitions of phobia include the physical signs of fear: sweating, shaking, rapid heartbeat, and breathing. But like fast breathing, not just breathing.
Although there's no real linguistic difference between the words fear and phobia, your personal fears might fall into one of three categories. Phobias, like the ones listed above, make you literally afraid and avoid the object or situation that inspires that fear, such as crowded places. Then there's lowercase f fears, which might be anxieties about very specific things or scenarios. Personally, I'm terrified of the possibility that my teeth might fall out.
Ooh, me too.
It's incredibly unlikely, and even if they did, we have dentures and dental implants to help with that, but I still worry about it way more than I should. A guy I knew in high school was afraid of cotton balls because of the noise that they make against your teeth if you were to chew on them. I should clarify he didn't chew on them. They didn't make him scream, but just imagining the sound and the squish was enough to make him shudder. Things our prehistoric ancestors never had to deal with.
Still, other fears, or like the capital F fears, are never really going to fade away because no matter how far society advances, some facts of life are inevitable. Things like isolation and incurable illness or losing a loved one won't ever feel easier to deal with. Fear of the unknown and death and what happens after has permeated humanity's collective consciousness since the beginning of time. This theme gets explored in so many writers, artists, filmmakers, and other creators of art that an entire genre blossomed from those primal fears, also known as horror.
Horror. While often used interchangeably with fear, horror tends to manifest as morbid curiosity. While fear tells us not to enter the very clearly haunted house, horror asks, but what would happen if you did? The suspense of watching a character enter a darkened room, fumble for the light switch, only to illuminate an empty room. Horror relies as much on physical setting as it does primal fear. Now imagine the camera switches back to the protagonist sighing with relief, only to reveal a shadowy figure standing behind their shoulder. That's spooky, baby!
That's what horror does. It allows us to experience fear in a safe and controlled environment. As a character runs from mortal danger, we vicariously live through them, whether we would also pick up a discarded kitchen knife to fight back against the intruder, or yell at the screen because, oh my god, the front door is open right there, why aren't you running?
The ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle coined a word, catharsis, to explain this exact sensation. He described it as the release of extreme emotions that occur after watching a tragedy, which leads to peace and restoration of the soul. If you know someone who really enjoys scary movies, it's likely that they actually enjoyed the catharsis that comes with being put in fake scary scenarios. During the tense scenes, our brains pump adrenaline into us as part of our fight or flight response. They also release the happiness chemical, dopamine, because psychologically, we know we're safe from the slasher killer behind the screen. I will be ignoring The Ring for the sake of this argument.
I think that's what we call spoiler alert.
This psychological response is also why we get jumpy or imagine murderers in every shadow for hours, days, or even weeks after we experience fear. Our prehistoric brains have been informed that predators might be nearby, and they're just looking out for us.
The reason we love fear, and also catharsis, is because it leads to transformation. Fake stress helps us react more appropriately in real-life stressful situations. We are, in a sense, more prepared because we've already experienced the physical, emotional, psychological, and chemical responses to fear, almost like muscle memory. Not that watching a scary movie every night will turn you scare-proof, because eventually you'll be desensitized. But still, it helps.
So how did Edgar Allan Poe use the concepts of primal fears and catharsis to his advantage? While relatively unknown during his lifetime, Poe is remembered today as one of the greatest poets and short story writers of the 19th century. Not only did he invent the modern detective story, paving the way for future famous investigators like Sherlock Holmes and Batman, you heard of him? But Poe actually invented the word detective. Alfred Hitchcock's fear-inspiring film The Birds was inspired by Poe's famous poem The Raven. So is the Baltimore NFL team, where Poe lived most of his life. And side note, I thought the entire genre of poetry was named because Poe was a poet. That is not correct.
Not even Poe was immune to the transformations and horrors that he loved to write. And like many characters in his works, tragedies haunted him throughout his life. Orphaned shortly after birth, he lost his foster mother in childhood and eventually was disowned by his foster father. He lost his wife to tuberculosis, and due to his commitment to support himself solely off of his writing, lived most of his life in poverty. He also liked to pick fights with famous editors and writers, which prevented his work from being published a lot of the time. Because he was an absolute petty drama queen, but aren't we all? This sheer amount of trauma and death that he faced in his formative years and later life led to his incredibly dark and cynical writing style, where he subjects his characters to the same types of abandonment, isolation, and despair that he suffered.
Maybe by writing about characters who shared his fears and struggles, Poe allowed himself the catharsis he vainly sought in his personal life. He created a genre for others to experience catharsis because he also needed it. However, he often spent too much time in this alternate reality he created, finding himself increasingly unable to exist in real society. His need to escape his troubles led to an early, mysterious death. The doctors were never able to determine what caused his sudden decline.
Poe's mastery of horror comes from creating scenes of tension and suspense, all while throwing every fear in the book at us. Being buried alive, torture and pain, loss and loneliness, the list goes on. Even someone who's never seen or read the horror genre before can crack the spine and immediately feel something's wrong. What do you mean the bird is talking? If that can happen in this world, what else can? The supernatural plays a huge role in his work because it provides infinite opportunities for transformation. His characters often transform from whole people or objects to something broken, to something else, often by unexplained otherworldly means. Nothing's scarier than something that was once human, except the knowledge that if that transformation can happen to them, it could easily happen to any of us.